start to official to record and to start for online our event.
Roya, I'm looking forward to getting to know you.
Now, so now we start. Dear my friends, I'm very honored to introduce Mr. Ramu Damodaran. He is the Chief of the Academic Impact of the United Nations, also Editor-in-Chief of the UN Chronicle magazine. He is my friend, dear friend, and also very important partner of the United Nations Academic Impact. The partnership with us in some very, very significant and also important initiative at the United Nations 2045. And so now, yes, we would like to introduce and invite Mr. Ramu Damodaran to host, lead, and moderate our event, the United Nations 2045 Initiative Roundtable. Thank you so much for my great speakers and panelists and our people join today with us. So we start now. Ramu, please.
Thank you so much, Juan. And I heard Ambassador Hunt talk to you earlier about the background to this, and I know some of us, like Prime Minister Zlatko, I've had the privilege of meeting before. He's been a regular guest at events of the Boston Global Forum. But I did want to share what Juan has just said about how this remarkable partnership came about. Simply put, Saturday, 3 days ago, was the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. And when we began planning the 75th anniversary, which is several months before the circumstances in which we are now descended upon us, we thought it should not only be an opportunity to look back on what the UN has done over 75 years, but also look forward. And one punctuation point seemed to be 2045, which will be our centenary, and to try and visualize the United Nations as it would be in that year. And thanks to Tuan and the Boston Global Forum, we've been able to do this in a range of areas and sectors. And today's focus is, of course, on the city. A particularly nostalgic moment for me to be with you today, because I recall it was on this day, the 27th of October, 16 years ago, that I was in Boston for a meeting at the university. And I could scarcely reach the meeting because that was the day that the Red Sox beat the St. Louis Cardinals and won the first World Series, I believe, in 86 years, in 2004. So congratulations on that anniversary to all of you in Boston. On the 10th of October this year, at 10:10 in the morning, 10:10, which is, of course, as you all realize, just a slight phonetic variation of Tuan, 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 Tuan. At that particular point, at Beacon Hill in Boston, the Boston Global Forum launched the website AIWS City. And I've had conversations with Tuan, who has really brought his cosmopolitanism to bear upon this, ranging from the great cities of East Asia, like Hanoi and Saigon, today's Ho Chi Minh City, to the cities of the United States, and of course the great cities of Europe, including Sarajevo and Vienna. And to think about this in the sense of how a city of the future can be built around, in a sense, the nobler sentiments of humankind. Now, when Beacon Hill, for instance, was first created or carved, the reason for its location was to protect it from invasion. But we now realize that a city can never be immune to invasion in a larger sense. Corona and COVID-19 prove that amply. So if you are going to build up walls against in cities, they can be physical defenses, but they're not going to be able to deal with dangers which can transcend those defenses. And so in some ways, I think the idea that Tuan had of sustaining a city through the nobler human qualities of compassion, of intellect, of kindness, as well as the joy of creative pursuits, be it music, be it art, be it literature, be it dance. That is what ultimately will sustain the city of the future and the city in the specific case of 2045. So that's really the ethos of this program, and I really look forward to our conversation. We begin with the privilege of having Prime Minister Zlatko Lagumdzija, the former Prime Minister of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And I remember my one visit to Sarajevo and going to Basrashia, the famous marketplace there, and realizing that it was half the size it originally was because it had been destroyed by a fire. And I think that again is a metaphor for the conversation we have today. We can take nothing for granted. So it's incumbent upon us to invest in what we create, the best of ourselves, our mind, our talent, our soul, and above all, our heart. So with that, Prime Minister, may I invite you to share your thoughts?
Thank you. Dear friends, dear Tuan, of course, first, I want to thank you, Ramu, for your really passionate work on sharing a culture of intellectual social responsibility through UN academic impact and having us and the AIWS net as a part of our shared journey. I'm honored to be speaking as a co-author of Social Contract for the Artificial Intelligence Age and mentor of AIWS net on this AIWS City, a model for cities of 2045 as our contribution to UN 2045 initiative. At the same time, I'm really eagerly waiting to listen and learn from all you distinguished friends and panelists, your thoughts on ideas that we all want to become reality while reaching for better, more world. It will be followed by a European strategy on AI relevant for Social Contract and AIWS City, related to my thoughts on leading changes in post-corona era and in search for something we could call new normal or new renaissance in shared society about alignment of strategies, structures of capacities and culture, ending with lessons learned and the next steps in European and my home city, Sarajevo context. Of course, I feel much more relaxed talking about social contract for the AI age and its implications since my dear friend David Silbersweig, also co-author of Social Contract, is one of panelists today. So any tough questions, I mean, I'm sure that he will be enlightening us all, including myself. It is my privilege and honor talking to you from Sarajevo, European Jerusalem, as Pope Francis named us during his visit. City where East and West meet. City I see from my study room, I see the churches and synagogues in the surrounding a few hundred meters. And speaking about Europe and Sarajevo as a symbol of shared society and values, culture and multiculturalism, about COVID-19 impacts on resilience, restart, and recreating new normal through implementation of social contract for the AI age and AIWS City, and being together with my dear friend Swanee, who I was meeting as Ambassador Hunt, civic leader and artist, in most challenging time for my country and for the European idea of unity in diversity. Before I say anything else, let me say great thank you, Swanee, for everything you did in my country, for my country, during the war, and helping us to stand on our feet, own feet again. A new social contract in an age of artificial intelligence recognizes that advances in artificial intelligence have already altered convenient ways of seeing the world around us. This is creating new realities for everyone, as well as new possibilities. It is time to focus through dialogue, through respect, learning and understanding on the key principles and practices for an agreement among members of society for shared social benefit that we are calling the social contract for the AI age. As you know, derived from 18th century concept of social contract, an agreement among the members of society to cooperate for social benefits. Social contract for the age of artificial intelligence focuses on its conditions of the 21st century. Just as earlier social contracts helped shape societies for a common purpose, the social contract for the AI age has a transformative vision, one that transcends the technological features of artificial intelligence and seeks to provide foundations for literally substantially new society. In short, with social contract for the AI age, I think we seek to build a world where all recognized and values and all forms of governance adhere to a set of values and are accountable and transparent. A world where global challenges are met by collective actions and responsibility. As a framework for the society in the AI age, the Social Contract 2020 is based on principles of balancing power among governments, businesses, civil societies, individuals, and AI assistants. So the social contract for the AI age is a commitment to protect common values and collective norms, as well as property. So to maintain a social contract in the age of artificial intelligence, it is essential for the countries to establish something which we call a democratic alliance for digital governance and UN extending international human rights standards to artificial intelligence while creating some kind of UN convention on artificial intelligence and establishing in a future specialized UN agency on artificial intelligence, maybe the way we have atomic energy, because after all, these are the two things that we can make a lot of parallel to. So at this point, this is the point where AIWS City, if I can say, walks into the picture. Our goal is, as you all know, is to construct an all-digital, virtual, intelligent, and innovative ecosystem for work, endowed with kindness, spirituality, and consideration, and anchored in an intellect. This is an initiative targeted to implement and to practice not only to concepts per se. So that's the reason why we, I think, anticipate using the global internet and its connected networks to help create an ecosystem for work and life supported by artificial intelligence, advances with the philosophy, application, and the practice of what Vint Cerf has called the people-centered economy. Let me remind ourselves that AIWS City is all digital virtual city based on a trusted open data that applies social contract for the age of artificial intelligence, people-centered economy, trustworthy economy, intellectual society, thoughtful and civil society, and artificial intelligence government, which means that AIWS City can signal to citizens ways to become more thoughtful by enhancing knowledge, culture, critical thinking, and social responsibility. In this context, I will say a few words about the state of the art of artificial intelligence, which we can call made in Europe, using some European Commission endeavors on artificial intelligence. After all, that's where I'm coming from. And before saying something more on social and content side, I will say about something that is more connected with the artificial intelligence essay and a European Union and European approach to it. In order to strengthen the development and use of artificial intelligence, the European Commission presented a strategy and coordinated plan that identify 4 key areas. First one, increasing and maximizing investments through the partnerships. The second area, something which can be called as creating European data spaces, not space, but spaces, by making more data available, ensuring full compliance with the general data protection regulation of the European Union. And third thing is fostering and nurturing talent, skills, and lifelong learning. And finally, the fourth element is ensuring trust through developing ethical and trustworthy artificial intelligence. This plan is seen as an essential for Europe to become, as we want to say, world-leading region for developing and deploying cutting-edge, ethical, and secure artificial intelligence. So the goal of European digital transformation over the next 5 years is to establish effective framework which will ensure trustworthy technologies. and of course it gives the businesses the confidence and means to digitize. So we can easily conclude that all together, that I just mentioned briefly, can create preconditions for developing an ecosystem for work and life supported by artificial intelligence, advances with the philosophy of the people-centered economy, and artificial AIWS City as its application in practice. The data strategy and white paper on artificial intelligence made by European Commission are the first pillars of the new digital strategy that is aligning with social contract for artificial AI age. They are all focused on the need to put people first in developing technology, as well as on the need to defend and promote European values and rights in how we design, how do we make, and how we deploy technology in real economy, which fits in its purpose of model of AIWS City. So the European strategy for data aims to create a single market for data that will ensure Europe's global competitiveness and data sovereignty. Common Europe data spaces will ensure that more data becomes available for use in the economy and society, while keeping companies and individuals who generate the data in control. So there's some kind of balance in between security and privacy, if it is possible to make it. In that sense, data can be an essential resource for economic growth, competitiveness, innovation, job creation, and social progress in general, while innovative data-driven applications would benefit citizens and business in many ways. This would be done by launching practical, fair, and clear rules on data access and use, which comply with the European values, with the European Convention of Human Rights and Freedoms, with European values and rules, such as a personal data protection. Let me say a few words about technology in European cities. Focus on European cities is sharpened in the latest Committee of the Regions that exist in the European Union, COR, and they have a report which points out just last month that regions and cities are pivotal in building trust and investment in artificial intelligence. They highlight the potential of artificial intelligence in addressing social issues. During the COVID pandemic, it has been helping doctors and researchers to diagnose patients, assess risks, and prevent hospitals from becoming overburdened. Committee of the Regions, or COR, report emphasizes that, I quote, the strength of local communities and networks lie in open, interconnected, and adapted local and regional cooperation. The future European policy framework should coordinate efforts at European, national, and regional, and even local level, promote knowledge sharing and ensure cooperation between the private and public sector. But what it says in here that it should allow room and flexibility for innovation while ensuring that at the same time artificial intelligence is free from bias and does not reproduce discrimination on the ground of gender, ethnicity, age, disability, or sexual orientation. So COVID-19 accelerated digital transition in the European Union, but cities and regions warn against growing inequalities. The COVID-19 inside Europe, not talking about with Europe and bordering countries or with Europe and the rest of the world, but inside Europe, we are talking about growing inequalities. And the COVID crisis and lockdowns across Europe have clearly demonstrated the need for digital infrastructures and solutions that are more than ever before. The digital transformation plays a crucial role in the EU response to the pandemic and in a future recovery. Because during the crisis, the use of digital technologies turned into imperative to ensure continuity of work and private life. Public administration and businesses in Europe's regions, cities, and villages have experienced how digital technology became key in alleviating the impact of the crisis in fighting the pandemic. So the strategy for Europe's digital future and strategy for data recognize the central role of digital transformation in the EU's response to COVID by saying, provisionally speaking, paraphrasing, that digitalization must generate a noticeable benefit for people. Therefore, in addition to development of digital technologies and digital skills, we also need to take ethical, legal, and social political aspects into account. Smart regions, smart cities, which means connected regions and connected cities, which perfectly fits in what we are talking about, AIWS City concept, should lead to the citizens directly benefiting from advantage of the comprehensive digitalization. And this progress must be carried out at the same pace in both rural and urban regions. The first annual regional and local barometer that was presented a few weeks ago underlines that COVID-19 crisis is likely to reinforce ongoing trends in the spread of digital services, but also the tendencies towards a digital divide and inequality. The same barometer, the report, shows that regions, cities, and the villages also went digital, such as with the creation of the online platforms, aiming to boost collaboration among different stakeholders in order to cope with the challenges raised by COVID. So examples that I just mentioned can be additional European originated argument for an idea and practice of AIWS City and the social contract in the age of artificial intelligence. Social contract for the IAH may be a framework in AIWS City. I call it glocal. I don't say global or local, so glocal platform for social inclusion through dialogue, through respect, learning, and understanding in order to move beyond our multiple identities and differences by making them our asset, not our liability, in order to start building something which we can call, freely speaking, community of the shared future for mankind. So the COVID-19 global pandemic has revealed the challenges for social inclusion. And I think that the current pandemic has exposed the vulnerability of exclusion across societies, impacting more starkly on racial, ethnic, and religious minorities, as well as migrants. Especially migrants, I'm talking about Europe. I'm talking just about the street that I'm living in, the people who are migrants on the street, helpless people. Social inclusion is critical for ensuring that the virus does not remain active among marginalized groups, and that the economic response facilitates the survival of the most vulnerable. The continued realities of social inclusion revealed by pandemic, if I can put it that way, will not be transcended now or in a future crisis without targeted focus to leave no one beyond within countries and among groups that have historically been vulnerable and marginalized. We in Bosnia and Herzegovina and this region know very well how does it mean, especially when national radicalism fueled by different extremists takes over. So COVID has exposed a world of inequality, division, and polarization. There are no doubts about it. But it also opens up the possibility of a world of caring and humanity. And that's what we are talking about. That's what our project is about. That's what our social contract is about. That's what AIWS City is about. Equity, internationalism, and humanity should be at the heart of the global pandemic response, and resilience, as well as a restart and reinvention of something which people call new normal. COVID-19 is not the threat to humanity, but it could be seen as ultimate test of our capacity to meet next level, at this stage completely unknown. Like we had no clue a year ago what COVID is about. Who knows what is next level of challenges humanity will be facing. So AIWS City and social contract in the age of artificial intelligence in my city, in my country, Sarajevo and Bosnia, in Europe, and in the world can help us to be passing the tests of our capacity that is needed for something which I call shared future in shared societies. So I see our gathering as one of the efforts to be organizing ourselves around these principles, to start creating some kind of global, let's call it alliance of like-minded entities, individuals, people, organizations, or movement of movements. I don't know how to call it. But this process has to include individuals, citizens, villages, cities, academic and civil society, media and business, as well as government and international institutions and people of creativity. When I say creativity, I'm talking about creativity in broader sense of that meaning. So our intention is not to rebuild pre-corona era, if I can call it that way, that we wanted to change anyway. Ideological and identities differences were more and more used as a cover for conflicts in between exclusivity, inequality, and segregation forces on one side, and inclusive, equitable, and shared societies forces on the other side. Let me go back a little bit backwards, because Europe is rich of history. So sometimes it is good to remind us of our history, especially if we can learn from the bad parts of our history, in order not to repeat them. We have faced devastating challenges before. Europe faced similar dilemmas in the 14th century with the tragedy of the Black Death, or bubonic plague, when that time overall global population, 450 million people, today we are close to 8 billion of us, 450 million population was devastated with estimated of between 20 and 45% people across Europe, Asia, and part of North Africa, believed to have perished in that pandemic. Estimated death toll in Europe was 40 to 50%, while just Venice and Florence, cities with at that time 120,000 inhabitants, approximately population prior to the Black Death, were scaled down to 60 or 65% of population who perished. So Black Death, Middle Ages, were followed by rebirth, which is more known as Renaissance, a surge of interests in classic scholarship and values, discovery and exploration of new continents, decline of feudal system, growth of commerce, invention or application of such a potentially powerful innovations as Gutenberg galaxy, printing, and mariner compasses, just name it. So it was primarily the time of the revival of classical learning and wisdom after a long period of cultural decline and stagnation. So any comparison in between Black Plague and COVID may be circumstantial and can lead us to a lot of conclusions in a broader context. So Renaissance can be seen as European architecture, can be seen in European architecture, art, literature, mathematics, music, philosophy, politics, and finally, the science. My dear friend Matteo Renzi, former Italian Prime Minister, in one of our discussions we had about education, have told me that he's the most proud of time when he was mayor of Florence. As he told me, known as the heart of Renaissance, home of Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Giotto, just name some of them. He tried hard in all his positions, but he never managed to come to the heights of his Renaissance predecessors, who were directing over 50% of taxes in what we today consider art, literature, music, science, and education. Over 50% of overall taxes. Can we believe it? Can we imagine that? So the age of enlightenment as intellectual and philosophical movement that dominated the world of ideas in Europe during 17th and 18th century emerged out of Renaissance. René Descartes in 1637, philosophy of cogito ergo sum, or I think, therefore I am, or Isaac Newton, 50 years later, Principia Mathematica, as the culmination of the scientific revolution, that are seen as the beacons of the Enlightenment, can be enlightening reminders of the strengths and opportunities that AIWS City and social contract for the AI age can offer. Although the sense of social contract concept may be found in antiquity, in Greek and Stoic philosophy, and Roman and canon law, social contract, either termed as a state of nature by Thomas Hobbes back in 6th, 17th century, or social contract by Jean-Jacques Rousseau in 18th century, emerged in an age of enlightenment, as the leading doctrine of political legitimacy. So this short reminder, really short reminder for such a great things, of how we emerged in Europe from Black Death to Renaissance, Enlightenment, and social contract, having tools and means that are art, literature, music, philosophy, science, education, and culture. That is strengthening my optimism about the shared future in the very beginning of post-corona era. Current epidemic, environmental, economic, social, and political crises and threats require new tools and means for the new normal, for something which we can call new renaissance, new enlightenment, and the new social contract like the one that we are offering about. Growing speed of change, our experience and our European enormous capacity built in our culture, in our heritage, in our identities, in history and knowledge makes this great task possible in significantly shorter time than our great predecessors needed. So what I'm trying to say is that, basically speaking, in this context, I see AIWS City. I see the social contract of the artificial intelligence age. I see the people-centered economy. I see the trustworthy economy, intellectual society, a thoughtful civil society, and AI government creating a complex elements of great mosaic, reflecting our prosperous and shared future. That is possible. That is possible. So AIWS City as a model of cities of 2045 implementation, I think, require aligning of the three elements. Direction, which is encapsulated in social contract for the AI age, capacity, structures like AIWS City, and culture. In broad sense of that meaning, there's a climate in one society, mindset, attitude, beliefs, values. So first, I have the direction, social contract, is here, and it will take time and passion to create awareness first, in order to mobilize relevant stakeholders. Second, capacity, AIWS City is defined, ready for building while constantly growing and evolving in size and content, starting with Boston very soon, and following with the gems all over the world. And third, culture, our beliefs and values based on sharing and understanding, not segregating, ignoring, our never-ending stories. Culture is something which is in every aspect of the meaning. And that all together, we have to be aligning with social contract of the age of artificial intelligence and AIWS City as much as it is possible. So I hope that we will meet soon in whatever way, at least by launching AIWS City based in Boston, and hoping to have you in Sarajevo as one of connected AIWS City gems. I hope that we will keep closer, socially closer, distant, while pandemic is going on. But this closeness through the things that we're talking about is something which is encouraging me a lot, and I really do look forward to be sharing the journey with you along the paths that we are talking about. So thank you so much, Tuan, once more, and Swanee, I hope to see you in AIWS City Sarajevo Gem one day soon. I mean, you can repeat. We have so many things that you gave us, and I'm sure that we will find our place and should be sharing that to the concept we are having together. But we have to do it again and again and again, and make new generations love to do it, the things we did that we're proud of. So thank you all for everything, and that was, as I understood my dear friend Tuan, that would be my role to do. He told me talk no more than 30 minutes, talk no less than 25 minutes. So that's the reason why I have to stop, because I'm 28 minutes since I started. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister. Thank you for that remarkable keynote address, and you've touched upon so much. And your last reference to young people brought to mind your own first exposure to the world outside, your experience in the United States when you came to Detroit as part of the Youth for Understanding program. And I think that phrase, youth for understanding, the fact that understanding occurs, as you said so eloquently, in the human mind, which is also capable beyond understanding of creation, of innovation, of adaptation, and above all, of resilience. When I think about the earlier part of your remarks, when you were talking to Ambassador Hunt and the situation in the Balkans, the role of the United Nations and certainly the United States in resolving that, one name comes to mind, and it also brings to mind a resolution by the Security Council on women, peace, and security. And the United States ambassador who was instrumental in supporting that resolution was a name you will be familiar with, Richard Holbrooke. And when I met Ambassador Holbrooke, I was working for the UN Chronicle at that time, soon after the resolution that I talked to him. He said, do you know, just a year ago, a lady named Swanee Hunt brought together 100 women from around the world to Harvard for a conference on making peace possible. That was a model for this resolution. And that was the first time I'd heard of Ambassador Hunt's name. And I'm very grateful that I meet her for the first time in this week when we commemorate that anniversary. And we look forward to her perspective of the city from her vantage point, not only of her illustrious background, but as the director of the Women and Public Policy program at the Harvard School. I should also mention it's an auspicious reference to have Ambassador Hunt here because the earliest social contract, as you will remember, was the social contract between labor and employers, which in the 19th century led to the establishment each year of a day of celebration of that contract known as May Day. And May Day happens to be Ambassador Hunt's birthday. So, Ambassador Hunt, may I invite you to speak? Thank you.
Please unmute. Swanee, unmute. Swanee.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah.
It takes a lot to keep me from talking. Yes, thank you. Ramu, I can't believe this introduction. I mean, I have to tell you, Zlatko, when people ask me where I'm from, I say, by the way, I was born and spent 18 years in Dallas. I never mentioned that. And I don't talk about Washington, D.C. now. I don't even talk about Boston. I was there for 20 years. When people ask me where I'm from Colorado, because that's where I found my vision and my voice. Roya, there is a place and a time you find your voice, right? And for me, it was Colorado. And I found my husband. So, and I proposed and he said yes. Okay, and then the second place I tell them I'm from is Sarajevo. And that's where my heart was opened. And I want to thank you. And you know, Twan, my good friend, I wanted to be here for you, but Zlatko, when I heard that you were going to be here, I had to make it work. Charles and I, just to give you a sense, he was a symphony conductor, and I worked with women in crisis. And he was the one who knew international relations. I knew nothing about it. I became ambassador because he launched a campaign for me to become an ambassador. I mean, it's kind of like Marty with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So you know, the husband takes on this campaign, and I'm saying, "Oh, come on, Charles." But I was heading up homelessness, the work on homelessness in Colorado for the governor. And what I said, I know domestic policy, I don't know international. But then when I got there, Zlatko, to Vienna, what I realized is that we had floods of people who were coming over, who were traumatized, who were homeless, in fact. And the U.S., you know, our State Department had no idea what to do about homeless. But what I realized is that, and this gets to the social contract too, that one country's foreign policy is another country's domestic policy. And it's so that is very, very important. It sounds too easy, but it is true. And you have to be in that other country, in your heart, your soul, to be able to be meaningful, I think, to be relevant. And I want to make sure that I'm not being naive here, because when Hitler came to power, he came to power in a country that was probably the leading country in the entire world in terms of classical music and in terms of university knowledge. And yet, what I have seen, and I took some notes, forgive me for looking down, but Ramu, what you were saying about the bringing together of the soul with the mind and with the heart. And I learned so much. Charles and I he worked with 30 orchestras, I worked in 60 countries, but where I would go, and Roya, I would be working with women leaders who were divided. They were divided. I mean, either the barricades had just gone up in Sarajevo completely unexpectedly with the shelling and the snipers, et cetera, or the fall of the wall, right? And so we were working all over Eastern Europe, Central Europe, Central Asia, and with women who were smart and active and expert, but they were divided. Some were looking east, some were looking west. And that's why, Ramu, that's why Dick Holbrook told you about that. It was a matter of bringing together. So I would be working with these women, and I would also be working with all kinds of NGOs, and we would be talking about numbers. Lots and lots about numbers. We talked about 150,000 people killed. We talked about 50,000 women raped. We talked about 60% of the housing destroyed. We talked about one's a 3.5 year siege, et cetera. But those numbers are so inadequate. And I think that's what we're talking about here. That those numbers are real. They're absolutely accurate. They are essential, but not sufficient. Because I could also tell you that 1 week after the peace was signed, I'm looking at you, Zlatko. You can't tell I'm looking at you, but I am. 1 week after the peace was signed, when Charles and I went in, and I started working with the women who were the hope, I thought. Charles started working with the orchestra. 7 out of the 70 players had been killed by snipers trying to get to rehearsals. That, as you know better than anyone, there was no heat, there were not lights. The lights would go off, and the players would flick their cigarette lighters, and they would be reading the music with cigarette lighters. And yet that performance, Zlatko, on New Year's Eve, it was the first time in 3.5 years that people had been able to come out. I'm thinking about COVID right now. And it was the first time, and they walked in, I will never, ever, ever forget. They walked in, the women were wearing furs, they were wearing high heels, they were wearing pearls, and they had the brightest lipstick on that I've ever seen. And they were, for a woman, you guys, this is very important. It's why, like why during COVID, a lot of us get up and put our pearls on, right? Just that reminder that life is going on. And when they sat there and they listened to the Beethoven Ninth, which of course has all of these allusions to the Siege of Vienna by the Ottomans. It actually has a march in it in the last movement. Ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. That's from the Ottoman Empire. And he's Beethoven saying, Alle Menschen würde brüden. And that's, all people, all men will be brothers. That counts. That counts. And the energy and the hope that comes out of that. And it stirs the heart. It gives you energy and gives you a sense of power. We can make it through time. So I could talk about Vietnam. I could talk about so many other places, and every one of them has a different lesson in it. I'm not going to take any more time except to say I believe in what we're doing and must look forward. We cannot simply say, wasn't it awful? We have to say, what is new? What is coming out of this? And I am inspired by what I've been hearing today. I already made a note for me tonight to write about this, just how I'm feeling from this conversation already. I'll be writing in my journal. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Hunt. That was very moving. And I was thinking back to the concert that you mentioned in Sarajevo after the pain had begun to heal, when I think Maestro Einsbacher conducted Mahler's Songs of a Wayfarer.
Yes.
And that's what we all are ultimately. We are wayfarers because, as the Prime Minister said, we are on paths which are unknown both to us and to those who created them. And the only thing that brings us there together is the humanity we share, and if you want to put it in a more formal framework, what has been envisioned in the social contract.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that brings to mind the mind, because we've talked so much about the mind as a force of creativity, of change, but as you mentioned, Ambassador, that doesn't prevent the same mind from being perverted to hate, and in the case of Nazi Germany, genocide. So that's something we have to be vigilant of. So what of the working of the human mind when it comes to the social contract? And for that, we have our old friend from the Boston Global Forum, Dr. David Silbersweig, who has specialized in the fields not only of psychiatry and neurology, but the larger question of the adaptation of the human mind. David?
Thank you, Ramu. And you know, I am so filled with hope to be able to be together today again, all of us. And I thank you, Tuan, and you, Ramu, for creating this forum and for having a series of events that can build upon one another and that can build our relationships, as the Prime Minister has said, in terms of our intellectual social responsibility and collective responsibility. And Prime Minister, it's wonderful to see you again. And you always give me such hope. And especially, you know, in the United States right now, we are in a very dark time politically. And to be able to be reminded that there is a type of leader, world leader and country leader who embodies all of these intellectual and ethical attributes, I think is something so important for all of us. And I appreciate also your sort of painting a picture and linking us to the history of pandemics and revivals. Makes me also think of today's topic in the AI City of utopias throughout human history, whether in philosophical or religious or social movement traditions. There have been utopias, groups of people or places and times where people went off and in some delimited ecosystem tried to create and, you know, transcend the troubles of the day or the perennial troubles of humanity, and to create a more perfect world and community. And I think I was just inspired by the Prime Minister to think not only, you know, that we maybe are trying to create the post-COVID or post-computer revolution version of that, but also that we need to learn why prior utopias failed. And I think that studying that would be very interesting and important. Why they weren't able to be sustained and scaled. I'm hopeful, though, that because this one, and I don't want to use really the word utopia or utopian because that's fraught with other things, but the AI City, I'm hopeful that in this age of science and contemporary secular or multi-denominational, multilateral possibilities, that we can do it in a way that does learn from previous failures and that will set us up for success, or at least get us a bit closer. So my task today, and as Ramu noted, you know, I can go off for quite a while on mind, brain, and human, and so forth. I'll try to be a little disciplined in the sense that today's topic is the AI City, and Tuan asked me to speak about medical care and healthcare in the AI City. And in a way, that's a crystallization of a number of the elements that we're talking about now, because as we know, and as was alluded to, health is not just the absence of disease, but the presence of a healthful, thriving, if not flourishing, being and society. And public health, social health is so important. And a lot of what's going on in the world today, or that has gone on, and I tend to think of this through a biological and evolutionary lens, is sort of pathology on the societal scale. And we need to be physicians of and healers of societies, and take it, scale up really, and understand social dynamics of Homo sapiens in a way that will allow us to identify what the chronic barriers tend to be, and how we can realize our possibilities. So how would we do this in terms of healthcare and getting sort of more practical? Well, first of all, any city needs to be exquisitely designed. And we heard from the Prime Minister about vision and infrastructure and really mechanisms. What are the means by which these principles are going to be transduced into a day-to-day working reality? And of course, there need to be resources and policy that's consonant with that, and perhaps a sort of opt-in mentality. You can't force people, and we want freedom and equity. And so how do we bring in people who have lesser means? How do we assure equity and also the power of opt-in of a voluntary community is something that can be where people agree to and show, hopefully, the world that there's a possibility for a certain social contract, as was discussed, is really important. And it's important that it's science-based, and that people realize that that's not in any dichotomy, or it's not mutually exclusive with caring and healing. In fact, it's consonant with it. And at least in the United States right now, this anti-intellectualism and this notion that we would all be labeled as elites, as if we're not trying to actually help common people and all of us, etc. We have to be able to help people understand that as the Prime Minister said, we have something to offer, and not doing it, but rather in a way that allows us to to try to contribute what little we can, and collectively, hopefully, what more that we can. In this AI city, I think it would be imperative that everybody is covered. All healthcare for everybody is covered, that everybody's connected in terms of the broadband or Wi-Fi and all of the software and requisite hardware. It would be imperative that the database and privacy are protected in ways that we've discussed in the past in our forum. It would be important that there be a universal electronic health record that is protected, and where anybody at any time in any place can have all their relevant health history and information and test results immediately available to whoever is seeing them for whatever it is that they need at that point. It would be important that there's coordination of care that's enabled by the sort of connectivity, and that will have human as well as algorithm-based elements. Passive sensing, which we see now with Fitbits and all of these other things, and where, again, in a voluntary and protected way, the health-related physiology and behaviors of everybody could be used for good, and AI can be used with algorithms that are not biased to be able to pull out the information that's needed to keep people healthy, to enhance diagnosis and personalize treatment based upon the specificity and the confluence of biological and social factors that come together. We have to realize that with epigenetics and neuroplasticity now, we understand that trauma and abuse and neglect and violence are harmful and toxic for the brain. And we need to then take a public health view around these social ills and use evidence-based ways and education to try to mitigate them. We need to understand risk and resilience factors to be able to enhance resilience, not just decrease risk, and to decrease stresses that are abounding in contemporary society, at least within some realistic and reasonable sense, and to promote healthful behaviors and to design the city in such a way with greenery and space and ways for people to interact post-COVID, hopefully, or even to interact better in future pandemics, to be able to enhance the caliber of the social connection, which we know is so important for our species and individual health and flourishing, and the realization that the mental health and the physical health are connected, not just metaphorically, and that social health embraces and enables both of them. So those are some thoughts that I wanted to share with you, and look forward to this continued discussion. And I as a sort of scientist and doctor, I think there's something very appealing about a delimited ecosystem. It's like being able to design healthcare for an island or something, where there's X number of people, there's Y parameters, there's, even if they're large and interaction terms, that there's Z boundaries, and then of course the thing is to scale it, right, to make it become an example that other people want, and a best practice that that can be a model, so that then we can help any city anywhere who wants to adopt these elements, and then figure out, it may be easier or harder to do it de novo, in a brand new built environment versus an existing place with all of its pressures and history and issues. But it makes me hopeful to engage in such thought, to engage in such shared dialogue and discussion. And the political sense that we hear from the Prime Minister, these are things that we can and should build into these efforts. So with that, I'll just look forward to other comments.
Thank you so much, David. That's a wonderful metaphor, that of the island, of how a physical, what you could perceive as a physical limitation, should not be a barrier to the possibilities and ingenuity of the human mind.
And it allows you to control without, you don't want to get into control in the sense that we see in terms of social control, and certainly not surveillance or any of that. But it allows you, and again, I would look to the Prime Minister and colleagues to control the variables, to control the levers, to have an opportunity for a change, to have, policies and infrastructure and procedures that are purpose-built to work together towards a certain end. And, that I think is very exciting. Absolutely.
No, thank you for sharing that perspective, and also the idea you had of passive sensing, because in a sense, the concept of passive sensing also summons its exact opposite, which is the active sensing from what we may consider to be inanimate sources, particularly data. And that really brings us to our next speaker, Professor Kazuo Yano, who is an alumnus of one of the Academic Impact's leading universities, Waseda in Japan, and who is now head of the happiness division at Hitachi Limited. So the fact that a multinational corporation should have a division devoted to happiness, and that Mr. Yano himself has researched data to show its impact on human happiness, is something which I think is compellingly relevant to the topic we're addressing today. So, Professor Yano?
Yes, thank you for the wonderful introduction, and I feel very honored to participate this discussion. I'm in Tokyo, mid 1 o'clock a.m. And but anyway, I've been working for Hitachi, global company, for 36 years. And the first 20 years, I worked for semiconductor business. But unfortunately, because of business reconstruction, Hitachi quit the semiconductor business. That's why I had to start something new. And our hope to start something new was to start something big or something very impactful for society. That was year 2004, and I had a collaboration with Professor Sandy Pentland or Thomas Malone or Eric Brynjolfsson. By using technology, collect a lot of data from organization and society to know more about, very quantitatively, how people be happy or make others happy. To make that happen, we developed technology to continuously monitor human behavior, as because many of biochemical reactions occurring in our body represent happiness, unhappiness, and good relationship, but many of them are very difficult to measure without intrusive measures. But human body motion can be measured very continuously with small computers, and that's why we start collecting motion of more than 10 million days from very wide variety of people and business and hospital and schools, three-dimensional motion data, as well as questionnaire data, such as depression scale, happiness scale, or social capital, or psychological capital scale, and correlate it and quantify what is the happiness of people. And we have identified very universal measures which is related to happiness of people. And as you know, you cannot manage what you cannot measure. Many of the argument to make, nobody will deny that this society or the future city should be happy cities. But without quantitative measure or it is very difficult to manage. And so we have discovered social happiness index, which is related to good relationship or good turn taking during conversation, or good conversation pattern, or non-verbal cues during dialogue. But anyway, very universal. It's quite independent from work. And so by using the technology this year during pandemic, I and my colleagues has just 2 months ago started up a new company called Happiness Planet. And I became a CEO of that new company that provides services or enables people to quantify the happiness of people very continuously, objectively, by the smartphones. Billions of people already have. So just download the app and we can measure city happiness, nation happiness, or planet happiness. What kind of policy or government policy or local policy will make people happy, or the change in policy or change in healthcare policy or many other parameters or variables we can change will have impact on the happiness of people in real time. So in that way, quantifying happiness, the technology is now quite available. And our discovery shows the essence of the happiness. Of course, how to be happy is quite diversified. Everybody has its own way to be happy, or every culture has different way to be happy. But very universal discovery feature we have discovered by the technology and very massive data is human relationship has a tremendous impact. Actually, more than 90% of the net happiness or per capita is, or happy people has good relationship. Not just, verbal representation, but more connections through nonverbal cues. Or so that represents trust and empathy. And so anyway, by the impact of the technology, we can discuss those things. Conventionally, it's quite difficult to discuss very quantitatively. And that will help us to make progress. Just like the science in the last more than 200 years has made technology, everything, many means to be happy or to have healthy lives have been made progress. And by the science, but many of the social things or human-related things are still, many of the things are not very quantitative or data evidence-based. I believe this kind of technology will allow us to make progress very objectively. So it will provide a common language to discuss for making future cities, future nations, future planet happy place to live. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really very moving, and I think it brings back to the United Nations and the very premise of our charter about the dignity and worth of the human person, and that dignity and worth is something which has to be extended and reciprocated. And I was very touched by reference to non-verbal cues, because the one thing I've discovered over the past 6 months, walking through the streets of New York with a mask, is that people can smile with their eyes. You don't need lips, you can hide the mouth, but still those non-verbal cues reach out. So thank you, and thank you for showing that data is something which you can extrapolate from and above all get hope from. Hope, in a sense, leads to the word dream, and that brings me to our next speaker, Roya Mahboob from Afghanistan. Roya Mahboob is also extremely active on Twitter, and I saw a tweet from her yesterday saying, another amazing project by the Afghan dreamers called Sperry Robot. The next generation of Afghan entrepreneurs and scientists see the unlimited potential that education and connectivity can offer them. No one should take this right away from them. So that again brings us to our conversation, to the right to the fruits of technology, including artificial intelligence, and above all, the right to be exercised by a demographic that has had that right long denied. So, Ms. Mahboob.
Hello, everyone. It's absolutely a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Tuan, for involving me in such amazing roundtable. I'm Mahboob. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. I am involved with technology since I was 16 years old. For the first time, I saw the computer, this magic box that changed my life. And I made to somehow technology be the center of my career. I went to school, graduated from university, and I started my own business company and in software engineering. And I find out that there are millions of the girls who are out there just like me, curious but giving another vision to explore the world. And all I wanted is to give them a door that open for the opportunities. And I believe that I started the Digital Sun Fund with one goal and one dream, with the goal to see that technology is an accessible option for everyone, but with a dream that to see everyone, regardless of their gender, social status, they can have access to quality of education and opportunities available to them. And so far, we helped to train young women in developing countries like Afghanistan. 15,000 of these girls come to our program. And then we started a team 3 years ago. We got involved with robotics and AI, which was a very amazing program that we started with a team called Afghan Girls Robotic Team, or Afghan Dreamers, that they changed the view on concept and perception of the women's ability in science and many other industries in Afghanistan and around the countries around. And I believe in an age where technology advancement allow for interest and competition in global market, our country is most directed resource and effort to increase the youth's knowledges and prospect. And advancing technology created opportunities for individual communities and countries. In order to compete and prosper in 21st centuries, all developing countries must be able to access the groundbreaking technologies that are transforming our world and realize the talent of all their citizens. Unless that the benefit of the artificial intelligence, AI, and economic engines like blockchain are distributed equally, we risk exacerbating inequalities, perpetuating danger bias, and widening the gap between the world's richest and poorest communities. We discussed in AI World Society City that all people should create the values for each others. And that's what I like about it. The age of automation, the AI will offer new opportunities and advanced economic advancement, but women face with new challenges, overlaid on the long-established one. Between 14 million and 160 million women globally may need a transition between occupation by 2013, often into higher skills roles. And many of the women still are not ready for that. But even despite investment and policy commitment, including through the Sustainable Development Goals signed by all countries in 2015, we have 113 million women or young girls worldwide are not in the schools. This is only not enrollment rate, but also the quality of education, delivery to teach and train successive generation in order to build workforce fit for the future. Education in a STEM subject, especially for the young girls, unlike multi-generational potential in any nation, especially in the countries that are recovering from conflict. Low-wage factory jobs have been a primary source of the outcome to become out of the poverty for many young women in South Central Asia. And this has benefited communities and families, but it is a pathway to economic inclusion that will increasingly tap off as robots and machines will take over these jobs. In a broad new world, young women will need to be able to seek opportunities for building individual wealth and the process, high value economic model for their nations. And that's why I believe that we needed to working in a campaign that to encouraging the policymakers in the region that they have to system-wide investment in STEM at secondary and higher level education, because it will shape the trajectory for the job creation, economic process, and ultimate more inclusive and peaceful societies. With right training and mentoring, we can give young women, especially young entrepreneurs everywhere, deep knowledge in AI industries and diversity of skills to drive businesses growth and stand out to becoming some impactful leaders. Today, we are working on a Dreamer Institute to building the first school of the science, technology, engineering, art, and maths. This school will be focusing on science, technology, engineering, art, and maths towards providing students with critical skills exposure to emerging technologies like AI. Upon graduation from high school, students will be able opportunity to continue their STEM education and the universities. And we are hope that this kind of the Dreamer Institute, like we call it Afghan Dreamer Institute, will be, we can build that in the region like Pakistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, all the countries around. And we make sure that every kids, every young girls have the right skill to be prepared for the future jobs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, because that's at once both optimistic, or to borrow a phrase that we used earlier, in some ways would have been considered utopian, but you make it seem extremely realizable and practical. And I think all of us are very grateful because you show the possibilities inherent again in the human mind and the constructs of the human mind, whether it is our physical beings or the communities and the cities and the technology that we develop. That has been a fitting conclusion to the set of presentations that we've been privileged to hear. I'd now like to invite our larger audience to join the discussion and share any thoughts or pose any questions to one or more of the panelists. I'll begin by requesting Mr. Martin McAdams to take the floor. Please, sir.
Martin. Martin, who are you? You are here?
Well, then maybe we could ask Mr. Pandho.
Yes.
And then come back to Mr. McAdams. Mr. Pandho?
Young Mark, please unmute and talk. Unmute.
Oh, no, Mr. McAdam, we can't hear you. Do you have, sorry, you sent a message in the chat. Do you have a speaker button on your screen?
Young Mark, we don't hear you.
Maybe we'll wait for Jean-Marc and then go on to Ms. Nguyen Lan from Vietnam.
Lan.
Yes. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to attend this conference. My name is Lan Anh. I'm journalist at Vietnamese online newspaper. I would like to ask ambassadors one question. The question is, what thing would you and free for all concert fund to us of the AIWS City?
Swanee, here. Swanee, unmute. Please unmute. Yeah.
This intelligence here is a little beyond me. Yes, you were asking about the Free for All Concert Fund. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And so what Charles did, and we did it together. This is actually about thinking ahead. David, you may know about this in Boston. So he said, I have a lot of experiences with orchestras. I'm going to die now. He had terminal cancer. He said, I'm going to die. And so rather than build an endowment for one particular orchestra, what I want to do instead, I want to create a civic foundation. Basically, it's a fund, and this organization, the Free for All Concert Fund, will fund orchestras, will fund players, but will not do the performing, right? And it's that kind of thinking that we're talking about here. And I'm really struck, Professor, what you were talking about with Hitachi and your work on happiness, that you really have to start thinking upstream. It can't be, are people sitting around in a cafe laughing? It can't be, do people have tickets to go to the orchestra? It's about, how do you ingrain this? How do you formalize it? How do you build it in to the cities of the future? And so for him, it was a matter of creating this entity with very, the thing was to have very high-level civic leaders like Michael Dukakis, but also leaders in the African American community who had worked on gang warfare, et cetera, and how do you bring people together who cannot be dissuaded? They can't go bankrupt, et cetera, and it's that level of oversight that is so important, because it's endowed, right? We raise a lot of money from a lot of people. So the money is there. The endowment can't be eaten into by an organization that can't meet their budget. That's the difference. The board of directors is there to keep an organization alive. And so if there's if you're a member of the board of a symphony, you do whatever it takes to keep the symphony alive. And sometimes that means going into the endowment. This organization will not, because it doesn't have an orchestra to keep it alive. All it wants to do is preserve the idea of this extremely important element of a thriving community. And Roya, I'm really impressed with what you said about educating girls, and that's what I mean. If that has to be ingrained in the community. David, what you were saying about in terms of mental health, ingrained, and so that's what they're free for all. But it's the principle we have to protect, that we must find ways to build this in. It can't be something on the side.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. I know we've had a couple of technical glitches, but I don't know if Mr. McAdams is with us now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, first of all, I feel like a bit of a fraud in this particular group. I think, I don't have the expertise certainly to comment on this. And as somebody who's known Twan now for 17 years, I'm very privileged to be able to participate here. But a couple of comments I'd like to make, particularly in relation to the social contract for the AI age, which Twan was generous enough to circulate some time ago. There was just two comments that struck me. One is that individuals are prohibited from exercising socially disruptive behaviors, and that government should behave responsibly in the management of AI for governance and interactions with individuals. And I think it's from the French National Convention in 1793, someone said, with great power comes great responsibility. And I think we have already begin to see the negative impact of the ability that we micro-target community. It isn't just, internet conspiracies. We see, members of elected governments now targeting communities to breed contempt, create social unrest and so on, which is very frightening. And in the UK, for example, just yesterday, they reported that in certain cities like Bradford, less than 50% of the population would take a COVID-19 vaccine if it was available. And why? Because someone from the community posted some stories that the government was deliberately infecting people and deliberately inserting technology into our bodies. And greater than that, I think that AI will be used destructively to manage voters and populations. And here in the UK, we're already losing the battle for this disinformation. Fake internet memes, conspiracy theories are abounding. And while we can legislate, we need something more in terms of building a system in which we inbuilt skepticism in terms of the populations that have access to the system, or all people who will access the system. And I just say, perhaps some people would like to comment on this, but I really appreciate the opportunity to participate today. So thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Prime Minister, if you're still with us, do you have any thoughts on Mr. McAdams' question?
Unmute. Zlatko, please unmute. Yes.
Well, I do really think that, we are now in a very tricky situation, which we are trying to figure out I mean, how to match technological changes and the speed of technological changes that are going so fast, and changes that are going in the economy that are going fast, but not as fast as in technology. And our social changes are practically so slow. I like to quote this. I think there was an old book from Jeffrey Sachs. I mean, about global wealth, and there's a very quote that I like very much. That we live in a time there is bizarre combination of Stone Age emotions, medieval age beliefs, and almost godlike technologies. So I think that we are actually discrepancy in between those speed of changes. It is even we are so to speak, if our emotional social level was here and our economic level was here and technological was here, it was a problem. But now it is going even more. Technology is going higher and higher, getting out of the stream. Economic power is going higher, and we are still there as a society with some kind, especially as individuals. I'm sure that David can talk much more about it than myself, but this is something which I consider very, very disturbing. This different speeds of changes along different horizons, and that is the reason why I think that we have to be a little bit more investing in something which is long-term investment, and the long-term investment that is giving dividends, very, very long-term oriented, is investment in education. So the only thing that I'm coming back to as an answer to this dilemma is, I think our educational system, and that's where I see our social contract, where I see AIWS City as some kind of laboratory, or some kind of shelter for better and faster exchanges of our experiences, about our spirituality, about the culture, about the things that really life is about. So I think that our overall education was, historically speaking, made for equip us to make a living, but our educational system is not prepares how to live. So if I can say that we are investing too much in well, not too much, but I mean, we're investing in the educational system in knowledge, which is some kind of technical know-how, but and let's say science and technology. But at the same time, I think that we are now talking about creativity, about these things, but at the same time, we don't invest in educating people in something which we can call culture and character in a broader sense of that. Should take a look how this platform that should be democratized as much as possible, this AIWS City platform, how it can come to this area, to this, let's say, space of knowing us a little bit better, use technology simply as a tool, because we are so powerful with the tools, but we are not so powerful with our mindsets, as not more powerful than the people from medieval age or people from Renaissance time. So our mindsets are still frozen there, and that's how I see our discussion about. And Swanee, I have to before. I hope Ramu you won't. But Swanee really hit me hard with her personal story, with I mean, where is she from, and connecting herself so much to. And Swanee, I have to tell you that, I mean, I was really happy when I heard that you are from the place or from the environment when you met Charles, which is not where you were born, which was not where you live. And I have to tell you, because I mean, I'll share with you a small little private thing, and I mean, this is a discussion about the friends, and I'm very proud of this private thing. I'm from theater, Swanee, because in '92 in Besieged City, some people were, and I was among them, we were convening in a theater, only one theater that was open, small theater that has about 200 seats. And the best musicians of that time, they made a play, musical Hair. And that was And basically speaking, I went to see that rock musical, Under the Shrapnels, Under the Shells, and I went over there and I enjoyed the music. I was out. I was in a different world. I see this Hair, the place where I was in Besieged City. I was last time I was watching Hair was 40 years ago in New York. And now 25 years ago, I'm watching Hair in the Besieged City of Sarajevo, and I'm in a completely different world. I'm like, Alice, this is no Kansas no more. I just walked into the Hair, and I think I see our AIWS City as some kind of place where we can go without literally going there, to try to consolidate ourselves and to try to let's say be ourselves and become richer, become filled up with something which we are into. And the last point is very simple. On the exit of the theater, before I was exiting, because it was very heavy shelling, so we had to wait until shelling stops. I met my wife. She was she was in the theater, part of the Hair play, and I didn't know her before, and so I'm cultured the theater, and resulted with I'm having two beautiful children with my dear wife, who I met in the theater, as actually trying to escape from the siege city, from the misery, to be in a completely different world without knowing, will I be alive in 2 hours when I walk out? So maybe this is something that is just a spin-off from what we're talking about. But Swanee, I couldn't just miss this opportunity to share with you how much I feel good about having your experience with Charles in Colorado, in Denver, and myself having the same experience watching musical Hair in Besieged City just 2-3 years before you came here to that wonderful concert that you delivered to us. So I'm in a completely new world now.
Thank you for sharing that, Prime Minister. And I think the story you attest about how you met your wife really attests, in a sense, back to the state motto of the state that Ambassador Hunt introduced us to, Colorado: nothing without providence. So that guided you along, held you secure, and I think has held all of us secure at this very difficult time. But in a sense, I think, as Tuan made clear, and our conversation has also made clear, the providence that we have is still within our capacity to shape and carve and give form. It's not something which is imposed upon us. Yes, COVID is imposed upon us. Yes, the coronavirus is. Yes, so many social injustices, including the ones that you mentioned and which Rubai spoke about in Afghanistan. These are imposed upon us, but yet we can shape providence to our own means, our own ends. And that is really the essence of the social contract, which all of you have been so instrumental in shaping and furthering. And I dare say that's also at the heart of what the city of the mid-21st century will look like. A city that is compassionate, a city that has conscience, and above all, a city that welcomes as much as it gives. So with that thought, allow me to thank all of you for having joined us. And I know this will be a conversation that Tuan will sustain in the months and years to come, both collectively and bilaterally. I have myself been greatly ennobled by it. I have learned a lot. I've had much to reflect upon. And I dare say all of us have that in some measure. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Ramu, and thank you so much, our keynote speaker and panelists and our attendees. And sorry, we don't have more time for JM Androd and Lowland King. Yeah, they really want to discuss more. So I think if you like to discuss more, we can please send email with us, and we send your question to Prime Minister Zlatko, Lagumdzija, and our panelists, and Ramu. And also, we continue to discuss more. I really appreciate your contribution today, and very great. ideas and thoughts, and very valuable for AIWS City for future. And you are great people for AIWS City for future. And next year, all of us here, you together will build AIWS City. Yeah, we see you again by online, by email, by discuss to build more. And great. Thank you so much for Zlatko and Swanee and Kazuo, Yano, David, and Roya, my dear friend. Oh, thank you so much. And Ramu and UN Academic Impact and UN Chronicle Magazine. We are wonderful collaboration and partnership. We see next month, November event at UN 2045 Initiative Roundtable. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.